Hello, welcome to beautiful Da Nang, Vietnam. I'm wearing my totally real, completely authentic, folding Ray-Ban sunglasses. And I want to talk to you today about the question of openness. There's this question of openness when it comes to being a communist. Should we conceal the fact that we're communists when we're working in a place where communism has been much maligned for a long, long time by bourgeois propaganda? Places like the United States, where there's a concern that if you even mention the fact that you're a communist or bring communism into the discussion, it'll shut things down and nobody will want to hear anything else you have to say. We get this comment from people all the time who have this concern. We hear from a lot of people who say that instead of saying openly that we're communists, we should just talk about the ideas, talk about the communist concepts. People will get into that, and then we don't even really have to mention the fact that we're communists. And here's the thing. That might work in one-on-one conversations, and I do that myself with one-on-one conversations, but it's not a way to build a mass movement. So let's get into it a little bit. The first voice that I would want to share when it comes to the question of openness is Karl Marx himself. Marx and Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto that the communists do not conceal our intentions. And this is a very important line in the context of the Communist Manifesto, the organization it was written for, in the history, the time and place where it was written. It was written for the Communist League. The Communist League was started by mostly German communists working throughout Europe. This was a chapter of the Communist League in London that the manifesto was written for. And the League began as a secret society. They had secret rituals and secret handshakes, all that kind of Freemason stuff that was really popular at the time. There were a lot of secret societies in those days. So they were kind of just doing what was almost kind of the norm, especially when it came to politics that were dangerous to get involved with. Remember, this was a time when a king could lop your head off if they found out you were a communist. It was illegal in Germany, for instance, to have communist materials on your whereabouts. It was a much different time to be operating. And so it's kind of natural that they chose the secret society format at the beginning of the organizational history. But Marx and Engels saw that in England, there were different material conditions than back in Germany. You could operate more openly without the fear of like immediate super harsh reprisal. And so they decided to write the manifesto. Marx made a lot of changes to the Communist League. He was very influential in divesting that organization of their secret society practices. And that's why the Communist Manifesto was written. It was a manifesto. It was a statement to the world. We're communists. This is what we believe. We're proud of these ideas. We know that they will liberate humanity. What do you think, right? And it took a little time to pick up steam, but the Communist Manifesto over the ensuing decades was wildly successful. Millions of people read it, and the communist movement was born. And in the time since then, we've had communist revolutions. We've had communist parties with millions of members. There are over like 5 or 6 million members in Vietnam's Communist Party today. And that's not including all the other communist organizations like the Youth Union, the Women's Union, the labor unions. There are millions and millions and millions of communists in Vietnam where I am right now. It can become a very popular idea very quickly. Social consciousness can change very quickly. Look at how quickly, just as a counterpoint, or I guess a supplementary point, fascism has become in the USA over the last 10 or 15 years. Open, overt fascism. People can change their minds quickly for worse, or they can change their minds quickly for better. Now, when it comes to one-on-one conversations, again, you might not want to lead with the fact that you're a communist. I don't always lead with that. I don't always tell everybody that I'm a communist in every conversation that I ever have. I think that would be kind of weird if I did that. We're not really talking about one-on-one individual conversations, and that's where I think we need more clarity. See, a lot of the times when I see these discussions taking place on the internet, I think people are really completely entirely focused on individual one-on-one encounters with people. And that is just not how you build a movement. If every action we take, every conversation we have is one-on-one, we're not going to make a ton of progress. Now, there's a place for these kinds of conversations and where they can be very valuable, and that's with things like recruiting, building cadres, and that sort of thing. That's how the Communist League began. Initially, the Communist League, every chapter of the Communist League could only have, it was required to have more than 3, but no more than 10 members. And it was sort of this cell structure where There were a bunch of very small organizations and groups teaching each other, raising the social consciousness of that chapter, and then going out and building new chapters with new members, and growing it out cell by cell in that kind of way. And that worked for a long time. But, at a certain point, you need to then come together and build a mass movement if you want to change society. Communism has to be, by its very nature, a mass movement. It has to have the people bought into the ideas. It has to be built with the masses, alongside the masses. This is something that Fred Hampton said that I think is very important. You go as quickly as the people can go. Yes, maybe right now it's not exactly the best time to just get a megaphone and go stand on the street corner and shout to everybody, hey, everybody, I'm a communist. Communism is cool, to a bunch of strangers that have absolutely no development, right? That's not really what I'm advocating for at all. But I do think that you can start to do things in your community with your party or with other organizations as a representative of your party. And of course, you'd want to coordinate with your party members about that, to start showing people, demonstrating people through your actions and through your organization efforts, what it means to be a communist and what you bring to the table as a communist, and revealing that you're a communist at the time and place that you think is appropriate, right? You obviously want to be strategic about it, but you don't want to be acting as an individual. There is an objective difference between going someplace as an individual, trying to talk to like a neighbor or a community member as an individual, versus working with an organization, rolling in with 5, 10 people, 20 people, 100 or 1,000 people. You could see the difference that that's going to make. So that's why we have to be building organizations, and these conversations that we're having, we can't fixate entirely on individual one-on-one conversations. There is a social conversation that's going on. You and I are engaging in it right now, okay? You can be writing blogs, you can be making videos, you can be having demonstrations with your comrades. There are a lot of ways that you can be engaging in the social conversation on a more mass scale. The more mass we can get with our conversation, our side of the conversation, the more impact we're going to have in wider society. When Ho Chi Minh first returned to Vietnam, he had to walk through the mountains because of fear of getting caught and potentially executed upon entry to Vietnam. He came with just 6 people, including Ho Chi Minh. So Ho Chi Minh and 5 other dudes showed up in Vietnam and started a revolution that within a year had a huge mass support. The same thing happened in Cuba. I believe that Fidel Castro showed up in Cuba with something like 82 comrades. And from that small core, they had a successful revolution and took over the whole island. So these ideas can become very popular very quickly. It might not be the time right now where you are to focus on rapid growth of a mass movement. Maybe right now you need to be spending time building a solid core, a smaller cadre that has very strong ideological cohesion. You're all on the same page. You've hashed out a lot of disagreements that you have and come to some sort of synthesis, right? You need to be doing that groundwork first. You need to have your ducks in the row, have a very tight organization. And I've learned all this from talking to people who really do a lot of work organizing and doing activism and that sort of thing. You want to have a solid foundation for your organization first. I've done a lot of interviews and a lot of offline conversations with people who have done very successful organizing. And this is something that everyone says, is that you don't necessarily want to just have this huge, massive organization right off the bat. You want to start with a very strong, disciplined organization at the core, and then build at a pace that makes sense for your material conditions. Now, maybe you do live in a place where it's just literally dangerous for you to organize. Maybe you live I'm from South Carolina, okay? I understand what it's like to come from a place that's very reactionary, and I'm not going to go talking to a stranger and telling them I'm a non-binary communist with a Vietnamese spouse, right? There's a lot of things that I could say about myself in South Carolina to a stranger that could get me into hot water very, very quickly. So when it comes to operating in a dangerous environment, let's look at what Lenin had to say about that, because Lenin began his revolutionary career in very dangerous, challenging circumstances. The Tsar of Russia was very brutal, and Lenin knew it. Lenin's brother was executed by the Tsar. He knew that if he got caught openly organizing for communism in Tsarist Russia, it could be death for him and everybody that he cared about. So he did operate clandestinely for quite a long time. Now, he later wrote that he wished that he didn't have to do that. He said if he were operating somewhere in Europe where things were less viciously dangerous to operate, he would have been more open. He said that we should be as open as we possibly can be in our organization. So maybe you really do live in a place where you really do have to operate secretly and use that kind of secret cell structure and build your cadre very, very carefully and slowly. That's fine. Lenin had to do that at the beginning. A lot of communists had to do that at the beginning. The Communist League did that at the beginning. That's how they initially built their numbers. So I don't think that that is necessarily a useless model for an organization. But I think Lenin's advice that we should use clandestine operations as a measure of last resort, we should be as open as possible, that pairs nicely with Fred Hampton's advice that we go as quickly as the people are able and willing to go. Ultimately, nobody knows the material conditions of your community, of your location, better than you do. You have to really study the material conditions of your area and have these conversations one-on-one as you are able and build a movement as you are able. I think the biggest takeaway here is don't hyperfixate and over-index on individual activity and individual conversations. A lot of people in my comments get stressed out about talking to their family. A lot of people have very reactionary family members. I do as well. A lot of people have reactionary friends. I do as well. Those conversations can be very stressful. There's a lot of pressure on them. It can cause a lot of just bad feelings and it can be very stymieing in a way. So have those conversations as you are able, but don't think that that's the work of the communist career, okay? The work of the communist career is building a mass movement, raising social consciousness, right? One of the reasons Marx wanted to bring the work of the Communist League out into the open is because he did the philosophical, methodological work to understand that a prerequisite of building a communist movement is raising social consciousness on a mass level. That's why he brought the Communist League out of the darkness into the open. That's how he was able to build such a massive global movement, by writing a manifesto, by writing newspapers, by going out into the world and spreading the good news, spreading that commie gospel. Another thing to consider is the fact that as more of us become openly communist, and as more communist demonstrations are seen, more communists are seen visibly out in public, doing mass activity, organizing our communities, having material aid programs for our neighborhoods, that sort of thing, the people will start to become a lot more tolerant towards us and even starting to love communism. It will slowly but surely happen as we cross thresholds. I really believe you have to study dialectical materialism to understand what I'm talking about on a deep level, on a fundamental level. Dialectical materialism is, in a lot of ways, the study of development processes and understanding how quantity changes quality. There's a quality difference between you being one of dozens of communists, and then there's a quality difference between having dozens of people on your side and having thousands. And then there's a quality difference between having thousands of people on your side and having millions across the country. We just have to focus on the step that we're on right now, that stage of development that we're in right now. Study dialectical materialism. We have a free ebook. You can get it at banyanhouse.org. There's a link in the description, and it talks about this philosophy. Pretty soon, in just a few weeks, we're going to be coming out with part 2, historical materialism. It's pretty much finished. We're just waiting for the forward introduction for some very exciting people who we will announce later. Look at the LGBTQ plus movement as an example of how quickly things can change. Now, I know that things are really rough for the LGBTQ plus movement right now. I'm non-binary. I have so many trans friends and comrades. So I know that things are really rough right now, which again is an example of how quickly things can change, because it seems like just 6 or 7 years ago, the trans rights movement was really, really getting prominent, and a lot of people were becoming more openly queer and trans and non-binary. And now there's this big blowback, but that's kind of to be expected. You know, every time there's a lot of social progress, there's going to be social reaction. That's part of the cycle of change. We will win in the end. The LGBTQ plus movement has had to deal with this problem of visibility and has made so much progress. In my lifetime, there's been so much progress. You know, I grew up as a child in the 90s when being openly gay was really anathema in society, especially South Carolina, where I'm from. And I mean, there was controversy about like having gay characters on TV shows in the 90s. And I remember that very, very well. But over time, LGBTQ plus activists have worked and fought and struggled very hard and built solid movements. And now most TV shows, I would say, a large number of TV shows have representation of LGBTQ plus people. It's become a lot more acceptable in society. There's still a lot of work to be done. But somebody who talked about this a lot was Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk was a very important gay activist and politician who actually was able to get into an elected office well before being openly gay was publicly acceptable. And Harvey Milk said, the more of us who come out of the closet and the more of us become visible in our communities and with our families as openly gay, queer, etc., the more the people will have to accept us. Because right now, this is, Harvey Milk was saying in his time, at that time, everyone was saying, oh, there aren't any gay people. It's very, very rare. But gay people knew at the time that it was much more common than most people realize. And it's true, as more and more people came out of the closet and more people became open, it has become more acceptable because you start to realize, like, it's not just a few weirdos. There are millions and millions and millions of gay people in society, and it's not so easy to throw away people. Most people don't have an easy time throwing somebody away if they're an immediate family member or a close friend or somebody you grew up with and went to high school with or that sort of thing. So again, there's a qualitative effect. As more and more people become open in society, things start to drastically change once you cross a certain threshold. And of course, when to come out of the closet is a very personal decision. You have to take into consideration your personal security. But ultimately, the more people who come out of the closet in the LGBTQ plus movement, the more visible we all are, and the more we can build inroads in our community. I have to say this because I know the kind of comments that I'll get if I don't make it very clear. Of course, coming out of the closet as LGBTQ plus is not the same as being an open communist, but there are parallels. There are parallels, and we can learn, each movement can learn from the other movement, and the movements are dialectically related. The more of us there are visible in the community, the less shocking it's going to be when you tell somebody you're a communist. The more people will start to understand the concept, the more social consciousness will be elevated, especially if we're doing things in the community to help and aid and benefit the people in our community. That's why people love the Black Panthers so much, because they were giving free food to their children who were hungry. They were recognizing problems in the community and they were solving them. If there was an intersection that was dangerous, they'd go out there and they'd nail up a stop sign, as Fred Hampton said. They were solving problems in the community. That made it easier to be an open Black Panther communist. They were Marxists. And that made it easier for them to raise social consciousness. It's all dialectically related. Check out that free ebook. It's a good read. So wherever you are in the world, I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are finding comrades. Sometimes it can be very tough. Sometimes you can feel very isolated and alone. But I promise you, no matter where you are, you can find like-minded people. And it might be dangerous to do so. Don't give up. There are people out there. Move at the pace that you feel comfortable moving. Of course, be very cautious when it comes to your personal security. Learn about operational security. Protect your ass. If you want to be a communist, if you want to be a revolutionary, you have to, at the end of the day, go out into the world and raise that social consciousness of the masses. I believe in it. I believe in you. I believe in us. I believe in this movement. Communism will win. So what are you going to lose? You got nothing to lose but your chains. Go out there and build some organizations. Vietnam is so beautiful. Love this place. Workers will unite.